My runaway ex-wife abandoned us 20 years ago, then returned to steal our home. I showed her absolutely no mercy fictional story, but meaningful. Where are you watching from? I've possessed one specific, unbreakable habits ingrained into the core of my being. I document and record everything. During my grueling years serving in the United States military, operating as a senior logistics commander and a trained combat engineer, a mathematical error within a complex structural spreadsheet possessed the catastrophic potential to wipe out a combat battalion. Unforgiving military discipline seeped deep into my flesh and blood, transforming me into a man who was obsessed with precision. When I received my honorable discharge and transitioned back into the mundane reality of civilian life, I retained an ounce of rigid nature. I purchased a reliable, unassuming beige sedan, and I washed it by hand on the second Saturday morning of month without fail. I tucked my local library card behind my state-issued driver's license inside my worn leather wallet. And most, I documented significant event, interaction, and transaction in my life, filing them away inside. Manila folders were guarded inside a fireproof steel filing cabinet tucked away in the corner of my home office. People whispered behind my back, I was a boring man. My former wife, Evelyn, had the sheer audacity to scream into my face during one of her frequent, volatile tantrums. Living in the same house with me was like being shackled to a mechanical metronome. I was on beat, but I provided a single fleeting moment of thrilling excitement. And to be honest, she was in her harsh assessment. I was the type of romantic husband who would show up at her workplace carrying bouquets of exotic roses, nor did I ever surprise her by booking extravagant luxury vacations to tropical islands. I was the humble man who knew specific brand of breakfast cereal her 9-year stepdaughter, Lily, preferred to eat morning. I was the father who lowered the blaring volume on the television. Set the second I noticed Lily pulling her textbooks out of her backpack to begin her evening homework. Whenever child suffered from terrifying nightmares at 2 o'clock in the morning and wandered out into the living room, I was already wide awake, waiting there. I would shift my frame to one side of the worn-out sofa and offer her the warm edge of my woolen blanket, without ever needing to utter a single, unnecessary word of forced comfort. Evelyn was the kind of restless, dissatisfied woman who lived her life as if she were running late to catch invisible, trained to a better destination. She hungered for the bright city lights, the parties, and the shallow adulation of complete strangers. The burden of being a dedicated mother to a young child, combined with structured existence of being married to a stoic, disciplined combat engineer, didn't align with the fantastical life plan she had envisioned for. Loving a child and putting in the grueling work required to raise them into a respectable human being are two different emotional muscles, and Evelyn had only ever managed to develop one of them. In the brutal, unforgiving theater of war, the strongest, most resilient soldiers waste their limited energy on complaining. They direct the entirety of their focus toward ensuring mutual survival. I continued to, and cook warm dinners night. I signed one of her colorful school permission slips with a hand, and I drove my truck through the torrential, blinding rainstorms to ensure Lily made it to her middle school classes on time. And the inevitable day arrived. On an overcast Tuesday afternoon in late October, Evelyn grabbed 2 packed designer suitcases and walked straight out the front door. Her made-up face radiated an aura of unburdened relief, her eager eyes locked onto a distant horizon where the suffocating presence of her husband and her daughter didn't exist. She walked away, without ever bothering to turn her head back around to look at the heartbroken child standing beside the glass window pane. Later evening, I pulled out a wooden chair and sat down across from Lily at our scarred kitchen table. I looked into the young girl's tear-filled eyes, and I delivered the hard truth using the most and measured tone a hardened military combat veteran could muster. Lily, I said, my deep voice remaining and unshakable. Adults make flawed decisions, end up hurting the exact people they're to love and protect. The undeniable fact your mother chose to walk outdoor today isn't your fault. Not a single bit. I took a slow, deep breath, tapping my rough, calloused fingers against the worn wooden surface of the table. But I promise you this. I'm going to stay here. I didn't say those words as shallow, empty platitude designed to offer temporary emotional comfort. I stated it as an undeniable, unbreakable truth, a sacred, blood-bound contract signed and sealed by the unyielding honor of a sworn soldier. And I kept solemn promise. I stayed when Lily turned 14 years. I finalized the complex adoption paperwork to make her mine. I can recall detail of day inside the oak-paneled county courtroom, smelled of paper and lemon polish. When the stern-haired judge leaned over his wooden bench and asked Lily if she desired for me to become her official legal father, she nodded her head and said, "Yes." The unwavering certainty and immense strength behind single syllable was more powerful and far more commanding than aggressive military order I'd ever received on a battlefield. We settled into an coat and drama-free existence from day forward. We spent our lazy Sunday evenings watching fascinating nature documentaries together on the television set. I taught her how to operate a manual transmission vehicle in the desolate parking lot of an abandoned shopping mall. When she walked across the stage to receive her high school diploma, I shook her hand, and after a brief hesitant pause, I pulled her into a bear hug. Lasted 4 seconds longer than I'd anticipated, and we both pretended not to notice the tears welling up in each other's eyes. 20 fast years had passed since Tuesday in October. Lily is 32 years, working as a successful, brilliant senior human resources director, living in a bustling, vibrant city located 3 hours away by car. We maintain our unbreakable habit of calling each other Sunday morning without fail. April, she makes the drive back home to spend the weekend visiting me. And time she visits, she remembers to bring the exact specific brand of roasted coffee beans I love, because she's like her man. She pays attention to the smallest, most significant details. I reside inside the exact same sturdy wooden house situated on Clover Mill Road. This sturdy home had witnessed the maturation of my daughter, and I intended to live out the remainder of my natural days here until my lungs drew their last breath. I spent my abundant free time repairing minor issues around the property, writing down specific, detailed task lists on a battered notepad attached to the front of the refrigerator door. Replace the leaky rubber gasket on the kitchen sink faucet. Repair the rusty latch on the living room window. And at the bottom of page, there was one line of text written out. Lily was my personal method of reminding to keep her at the forefront of my mind during the most mundane, repetitive moments of my routine. The cult, unassuming life of an aging, retired maintenance man would have continued to drift along uninterrupted if the forgotten area surrounding Clover Mill Road hadn't fallen into the aggressive, greedy crosshairs of a multi-billion-dollar tech development conglomerate. The specific plot of land my sturdy house occupied had become the most critical, vital transportation bottleneck required for their sprawling corporate campus project. Overnight, my modest average residential property was appraised at an insane, mind-boggling valuation, $5 million. To a disciplined, pragmatic military veteran like, sums of money are nothing more than lifeless numbers printed on a piece of paper. I already possessed a funded, secure retirement savings account was more than adequate to cover my modest living expenses forever, and everything else I owned, including this coveted house and the land it sat on, was already written into my ironclad will to be left to Lily. But the intoxicating scent of unbelievable wealth possesses a strange, powerful magnetic pull for opportunistic vultures. It travels distances, awakening buried, forgotten ghosts you believed were sleeping at the bottom of the darkest abyss. Last Thursday morning, while I was hunching over my workbench, attempting to repair rusty window latch with my battered, familiar set of tools, an shiny brand Mercedes G-Class SUV roared down my street and slammed its brakes in the middle of my driveway. The armored doors swung open and 2 distinct figures stepped out onto my property. The first was a tailored man who appeared to be in his early 50s, wearing a skin-tight, custom-fitted pinstripe business suit, hiding his eyes behind designer sunglasses, his hair slicked back with gel. Walking beside him was a woman. The layers of cosmetic makeup and her vibrant silk dress couldn't camouflage the undeniable, toll 20 years of hard living had carved into her aging face, but I recognized those calculating eyes the second I saw them. It was Evelyn, the mother who had abandoned her daughter 20 agonizing years ago. I stood on my wooden porch, my grease-stained hands gripping a worn screwdriver. I wiped my hands on a shop rag, my calculating eyes hidden beneath the worn brim of my baseball cap, assessing the two hostile, uninvited intruders who had breached my perimeter. The catastrophic storm had arrived at my front door. And these two delusional fools had no idea, hidden beneath the frayed clothes of an aging man, the trained monster from the battlefield was already wide awake and prepared to engage. Evelyn stopped at the edge of my creaking, weather-beaten wooden front steps. Her predatory eyes swept over my battered, work-worn body as if I were nothing more than an obsolete piece of broken yard furniture needed to be thrown into the nearest garbage dumpster. "Hello, Frank," Evelyn said, her harsh, grating voice attempting to force out a fake, stiff societal smile. You look aged compared to the days. I suppose the march of time spares no one, does it?" I refused to offer her a single syllable in response. He thrust his manicured hand forward in a dominant gesture, flashing a solid gold watch reflected the afternoon sunlight straight into my eyes. "Listen to me, man, Frank. My name is Richard, and I'm a powerful corporate attorney, as is Evelyn's successful future husband." The man barked, his tone scraping against my ears like two pieces of rusted scrap metal grinding together. I can only assume a confused, isolated hermit has caught wind of the multi-billion-dollar tech development project set to bulldoze this neighborhood. We're here today to discuss the immediate surrender of this specific piece of real estate. Evelyn possesses a documented, binding legal claim to 50% of this property's financial value due to significant, critical procedural errors committed during your botched divorce proceedings 20 years ago. I raised one of my eyebrows, projecting the convincing image of a confused, bewildered man who was overwhelmed by the complexities of the modern world. Divorce? But everything was settled by the county judge over 20 years ago. I raised Lily by inside this house, sir. Richard let out an bark of laughter echoed across my otherwise silent front yard. The cute, overpowering stench of his designer cologne assaulted my nose, making my stomach churn with deep disgust. "You need to listen to me now, you fool," Richard growled, his deep, threatening voice dropping into a aggressive snarl loaded with undeniable malice. "The only reason you believe the legal paperwork was finalized is because your deteriorated brain is incapable of comprehending the glaring legal loopholes a uneducated collar mechanic could ever identify in a million years. This specific plot of dirt is valued at several millions of dollars, and Evelyn is going to extract what belongs to her. You've two distinct, unavoidable options." He ripped a stack of stapled legal documents out of his sleek, alligator skin briefcase and shoved them against my chest. "Your first option. You sign this binding legal power of attorney and this detailed property division agreement. We'll sell this rotting house to the tech conglomerate. We'll throw you scraps of cash enough to rot away in underfunded state-run nursing home, and Evelyn will take the overwhelming majority of the payout. Your second option. We'll drag you into a publicized, brutal courtroom battle. Given your documented state of severe, crippling mental decline and undeniable senility, we can petition the presiding judge to strip you of legal rights to control your financial assets. And furthermore, if you attempt to put up stubborn resistance, I'll guarantee the successful life of daughter Lily Yourov will be destroyed. A prolonged civil lawsuit packed with publicized allegations of severe financial manipulation and elder abuse will shatter her corporate career into a million irreparable pieces." Evelyn crossed her manicured arms across her chest, jutting her chin high into the air as she chimed in. "Sign the damn papers, Frank. Don't make this difficult you've hoarded this rotting rat's nest for far, and it's time for you to hand over what belongs to me. And let's be honest here, Lily doesn't want or need this decaying pile of garbage anyway." A dead silence descended upon the wooden porch. Other normal, emotional civilian man trapped in this volatile situation would have erupted into an uncontrollable blinding fit of rage, or hurled stack of insulting legal documents into the offensive faces of those two shameless vultures. But I'm frank. During my brutal years serving in the military, I was trained to remain stoic, to analyze the battlefield, to identify the exact critical weaknesses of my enemies, and to wait in the deep shadows for the moment to strike a unstoppable killing blow. Uncontrolled, volatile human emotion is recognized as the most enemy of successful combat soldier. I looked down at the stack of complex legal papers resting in my hands. I forced my rough, calloused hands to tremble, blinking my eyes in rapid, erratic succession to execute the convincing role of a terrified, confused, and man who was terrified by the aggressive, terrifying legal threats of these high-powered corporate attorneys. "I'm a tired man," I mumbled, forcing my deep voice to sound shaky, and "I don't understand of this complicated legal language. I need time to read through of this. A days, please. Give me a days." Richard let out a disgusted snort of unfiltered contempt. He slapped his hand onto my shoulder, applying an amount of physical force, caused me to stumble backward in convincing clumsiness. "All right, you fool. Take the time you need to. Read through Word. We'll return here on Tuesday morning of next week, and we'll be bringing a official, state-certified notary public with us. If you're refusing to sign by, you better prepare your fragile mind for a destructive court battle. And you can also go ahead and start writing a emotional goodbye letter to your daughter's corporate career while you're at it." Without another word, he grabbed Evelyn by the arm, spinning around, and stomped back to his vehicle. The Mercedes engine roared to life, tearing away from my property and leaving behind a swirling cloud of dust floating over the cracked asphalt. I remained motionless on my wooden steps until the vehicle vanished behind the distant tree line. The submissive smile vanished from my face, replaced by a terrifying razor scowl of concentrated intent. "The enemy has marched straight into an active armed minefield," I whispered into the crisp air. "And they didn't bother to scan the damn dirt beneath their shoes." Foolish man named Richard had committed two catastrophic tactical errors. Number one, he judged my actual capabilities based on my faded, worn-out exterior camouflage. Number two, and more important, he had possessed the sheer, suicidal audacity to launch a direct, explicit threat against my daughter. When you aim a loaded weapon at the child of a trained combat veteran, you've signed your inescapable, irreversible death warrant. I turned around, walked back inside my home, and threw the metal deadbolt lock. My wooden house was transformed into a secure, fortified tactical command center. I marched into my home office, wiping away a thin layer of dust covering my ancient desktop computer system. Hidden beneath deceptive, battered exterior casing was a powerful array of advanced data encryption and sophisticated surveillance analysis hardware I'd preserved from my classed days serving in military intelligence. I snatched up the desk phone and dialed a secure, encrypted sequence of numbers was burned into my memory. The secure line was answered after 2 rings. "Hello, Commander," a resonant, authoritative male voice responded. It was Marcus, a brilliant former intelligence data analyst who had served beneath my command during multiple classified, covert operations, and who was operating an elite, secretive private cyber investigation firm. "Marcus, I require an comprehensive deep dive background investigation on a man who goes by the name Richard, a corporate attorney who's claiming to be the fiancé of my former wife, Evelyn." My voice snapped out like the metallic crack of a rifle firing, devoid of the man persona I'd been acting out. "I want you to rip apart everything. I want one of his confidential credit reports, hidden corporate shell account, sealed civil litigation records, and a thorough breakdown of real estate development project his hands have ever touched. I want to know what terrifying secret this bastard is trying to hide." "Understood. Sir, you'll have the complete unredacted intelligence dossier on your secure server in 24 hours. I slammed the phone receiver back onto its base, yanked open my bottom desk drawer, retrieved a brass key, and unlocked the duty steel filing cabinet bolted into the corner of the room. Sitting organized inside vault were dozens of detailed manila folders arranged by year, documenting everything from the exact day Evelyn walked out, the way up to this morning. Richard believed he could drag me into a courtroom armed with a baseless accusation of severe mental incompetence and blatant financial manipulation. Fool, believed a uneducated maintenance worker would lack the complex legal knowledge required to defend against his aggressive, threatening corporate legal jargon. He had zero clue, for the past 20 grueling years, utilizing the exact precision of a master engineer and the unbreakable, ironclad discipline of a seasoned combat veteran. I'd documented everything. I called them my letters of record. These were not emotional, subjective pages from a tear-soaked diary. They were detailed, specific, actionable, timestamp verified chronological intelligence reports. I documented financial expenditure related to raising Lily, preserving tuition receipt, and maintaining organized bank statements demonstrated undeniable financial transparency. I'd also retained the exact records of time Evelyn had refused to visit her daughter, the specific dates of returned piece of mail, and the extensive detailed annual medical evaluations conducted by licensed military psychiatrists, proved I was in a state of unbreakable mental and physical perfection. The single cardboard box containing 23 years' worth of preserved birthday cards, public school report cards, and the crayon drawings Lily had gifted me when she was 10 years was, by an indestructible pillar of legal evidence, proving an unbreakable, loving father-daughter bond, was built upon decades of unwavering dedication and unconditional love. There was no corporate lawyer anywhere on the face of the earth, no matter how aggressive or who could shatter the undeniable truth had been recorded for over 2 decades. I stayed awake night, organizing of the critical evidence, encrypting the data files, and transferring everything to Mr. Ashford Ann, trusted personal friend and a brilliant legal mastermind who had handled of my complex legal affairs for over 10 years. The next afternoon, my computer monitor flashed, indicating the arrival of a encrypted, top-secret data file from Marcus. The corners of my mouth curled upwards into a terrifying smile. Attorney named Richard was nothing more than a hollow, terrified fraud. Marcus's detailed intelligence dossier proved Richard's touted corporate law firm was drowning in insurmountable debts owed to underground loan sharks, and he was facing an avalanche of severe criminal complaints for committing aggressive, blatant investment fraud. The fool was running a illegal Ponzi scheme disguised as a series of legitimate commercial real estate development projects, and his fragile financial bubble was seconds away from exploding. He was to get his greedy hands on the financial payout from the upcoming sale of my Clover Mill Road property, viewing it as a life-saving flotation device for a drowning man, praying he could use my money to plug his financial craters and escape an imminent FBI manhunt, was the true reason why he had approached Evelyn and manipulated her into returning to steal my home. Everything was now. This was no longer a routine legal dispute over a piece of property. This was now a full-scale, active military operation designed to obliterate my enemy. They'd underestimated what they thought was a yard worker. I was now going to demonstrate how this man could detonate a catastrophic nuclear bomb in the center of their egos. Later, exact same weekend, I drove my truck straight into the bustling center of the city to meet with Lily. My daughter had requested we meet at a discreet coffee shop located next to a lake. When I slid the confidential investigation dossier and the stack of surveillance photographs across the table to her, the warm, joyful smile vanished from her face. A brief flash of deep, agonizing pain rippled across her eyes, not because she was terrified or intimidated by their empty threats, but because she was experiencing the disappointment of realizing her biological mother had returned with the intent to destroy the life we'd built together. Dad, Lily looked up at me, her eyes dry and now burning with an terrifying intensity was identical to the relentless, hardened gaze of a veteran combat soldier preparing to breach enemy lines. These people believe they can weaponize my existence to extort you. They believe I'll be panicked and terrified about losing my corporate position. I'll beg you to surrender the house to protect my fragile reputation. I nodded my head, placing my calloused hand onto her shoulder. In the brutal, unforgiving theater of war, the enemy is searching for your weakest, most point. If they believe they've identified it, they'll drop their guard and become careless. Tell me, are you afraid? I'm the daughter of Frank. Lily smiled, her posture radiating an unshakable defiance. I don't know the meaning of the word fear. What's our next tactical move? We're going to allow them to believe they're winning this battle, I replied, taking a slow, deep sip of my sugarless coffee. I've already communicated with my attorney, Ashford. We're going to agree to participate in a formal documented legal mediation session. Specific calculated tactical maneuver will lure bastard Richard out of his hidden rat hole, pulling him straight into a controlled, confined environment where everything will be recorded and witnessed. And when he feels the most powerful, I'm going to rip out one of his fangs. A days later, executing the complex tactical plan as we'd designed it, Attorney Ashford sent a formal, crafted, written response to Richard's office, agreeing to organize a preliminary mediation meeting located at the neutral, secure office of an independent, state-licensed mediator. Throughout the legal document, we utilized submissive, appeasing language implying the Mr. Frank does not desire an exhausting legal conflict and was eager and to negotiate the immediate financial division of the disputed property. The greedy prey swallowed the hooked bait with laughable ease. On Tuesday morning, the anticipated formal mediation session commenced inside an wood-paneled executive boardroom situated on the 20th floor of a shining glass corporate skyscraper in the bustling downtown district. The brilliant, blinding morning sunlight poured straight through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, reflecting off the polished surface of the oak conference table. I shuffled into the room, wearing my most faded, worn-out work shirt, clutching my battered, stained baseball cap in my trembling, calloused hands. Attorney Ashford, projecting his standard, reliable aura of unbreakable and slow, deliberate composure, pulled out a leather chair I could sit down. Sitting across the wooden table, Richard and Evelyn were already waiting for us. Her eyes flicked over and Lily, revealing zero trace of the maternal guilt a normal, decent human being should feel after abandoning their child for 2 decades. The experienced, official state mediator and stern-looking woman in her late 50s tapped her rubber gavel against the table to bring the room to complete order. The primary official objective of this formal gathering today is to discover an agreeable, binding resolution regarding the official ownership rights of the real estate property located on Clover Mill Road, thereby avoiding a lengthy courtroom trial, she announced in a crisp, authoritative tone. Attorney Richard, you may now present the specific, detailed demands of your client. Richard cleared his throat, shooting up from his chair like a preening rooster preparing to assert dominance. He slammed a stack of legal files onto the polished wooden table with an intimidating thud. Thank you, Madam Mediator, Richard began, his booming voice echoing across the room, attempting to dominate other sound. My client, Ms. Evelyn, is the official recognized former wife of Mr. Frank. The original historical division of their joint financial assets following their divorce over 20 years ago was plagued by severe illegal discrepancies. Mr. Frank capitalized on Evelyn's fragile emotional and psychological state at specific time to hijack and seize ownership of the house. He paused for a calculated second, glaring down at me with an hateful expression of unfiltered contempt before thrusting his manicured finger toward Lily. And furthermore, throughout the passing years, Mr. Frank has, and yes, I emphasize the specific word, isolated his daughter Lily away from her loving, biological mother. He has brainwashed and manipulated this child, compelling her to turn her back on her mother. And now, at this exact moment, when his deteriorating mind is beginning to collapse, he's using his daughter as a manipulative tool to prevent my client from claiming her guaranteed financial rights. I remained, burying my face downward toward the table, intertwining my calloused fingers and forcing them to tremble. Lily bit down hard on her lower lip, executing a brilliant Oscar-worthy performance of devastated helplessness. Richard pressed his offensive advantage, repeating the word until it became sickening and He accused me of having calculated a illegal scheme to steal the property from the beginning, before the dirt possessed actual value. He demanded I must nullify of my existing wills, and I was obligated to sign an immediate, unbreakable power of attorney document to sell the property to the tech conglomerate. He demanded Evelyn receive 60% of the multi-million-dollar payout. In return for my surrender, he offered to show me mercy by guaranteeing he would not this damaging, fabricated scandal to the corporate press, thereby protecting Lily's fragile career from annihilation. This is an unprofitable deal for a man who can't remember his damn name, Richard concluded his speech with an smirk, tossing the single, demanding legal agreement paper into the center of the table. Sign the paper, Frank, because if you refuse, tomorrow morning, a civil lawsuit will be slammed onto the wooden desk of your daughter's corporate boss. The official mediator turned her stern face toward our side of the table, furrowing her brows. Attorney Ashford, does your side wish to offer official, formal response to these aggressive demands? Ashford didn't rush to speak. He turned his head to look at me, offering a single, subtle, imperceptible nod. The moment had arrived. I lifted my head. Ounce of the trembling confusion was gone. The terrified, submissive hesitation vanished. The hunched back of the carpenter straightened, becoming as rigid and unbreakable as a wall of solid titanium. The actual physical temperature inside the boardroom felt like it plummeted several degrees. I stared straight into Richard's smug eyes, the terrifying aura radiating from a trained, former senior intelligence officer slammed into him, causing the smirk on his face to freeze in terror. You possess the sheer, suicidal audacity to claim I executed a calculated strategy to isolate Evelyn from her daughter. I spoke. My deep voice was not, but it was deep, resonant, and it possessed the undeniable weight of a military command couldn't be questioned. You dare to claim my disciplined, trained mind is suffering from severe cognitive decline. Richard attempted to regain his shattered composure. Yes, we've credible medical documentation proving you lack the necessary legal mental capacity. I shot my hand straight up into the air, a simple dominant gesture overflowing with unquestionable authority. It caused him to shut his mouth. The composed attorney unsnapped the brass clasps on his leather briefcase, pulling out 2 packed cardboard archive storage boxes, and slammed them down onto the polished table with an thud. Madam Mediator, Ashford began, his voice slow, resonant, and deliberate. This collection of physical evidence here is what we refer to as the letters of record. What you're looking at is 20 full years of documentation. 20 years of banking statements, detailed financial receipts, and comprehensive medical evaluations signed and certified by a respected panel of elite military psychiatrists, certifying Mr. Frank possesses an exceptional, genius-level IQ and impenetrable mental stability. Ashford opened the box, extracting the documented files. Exhibit A, Ashford announced, his voice carrying the weight of an unstoppable boulder. A undeniable stack of returned postal letters proving Mr. Frank attempted to send detailed, positive updates regarding Lily's life to Evelyn for the first 5 years, and of them was rejected or returned because she had changed her address without notifying him. There was no isolation orchestrated here, Madam Mediator. The brutal truth is this mother abandoned her child. Evelyn's powdered face drained of color, turning the sickening shade of a pale, dead ghost, as she snapped her head away to avoid the mediator's judgmental gaze. Exhibit B, Ashford continued, yanking an bound stack of legal documents out of the box. The original, detailed property appraisal documents and the official, binding court transcripts from 20 years ago. Evelyn signed explicit ironclad legal waivers to relinquish rights to the property in exchange for a lucrative lump sum of instant cash she could run away with her lover. This legal case has been and closed for 20 years, and there are no existing legal loopholes for you to exploit. Richard's face began to twitch and shift colors. His empty, fabricated legal arguments were being shredded into a million pieces by indestructible, binding steel evidence. But was the polite appetizer I've been the kind of soldier who was ever satisfied with achieving a simple, bloodless victory. Once my weapon was loaded, the armor-piercing bullet had to blast straight through the center of the enemy's heart. I reached into the inner pocket of my faded jacket, ripping out a single thin crimson file folder, and I slammed it down into the exact center of the table, stopping underneath Richard's sweating, terrified nose. "And this here attorney Richard," I said, my voice low and like the deepest, darkest ice. "This here is an actual, genuine, effective strategy." Richard's manicured hands began to shake as he reached out and flipped open the thin cover of the crimson folder. The exact second his terrified eyes locked onto the capital letters stamped across the top of the official documents, his pupils dilated in horror. Beads of terrified sweat erupted across his shiny, polished forehead. These were not boring civil documents concerning an irrelevant, minor property dispute. These were classified, detailed, unredacted internal financial wire transfer ledgers ripped from his secure, hidden law office computer servers. They were ironclad, incriminating forged real estate contracts, paired with the damning, illegal corporate tax returns of 3 fake offshore shell corporations he was operating out of guarded international tax havens. And there on the final page was a detailed, official, terrifying executive summary report generated by the unstoppable Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, detailing his illegal Ponzi scheme, branded with a vibrant, terrifying, bright stamp declaring, "Active criminal investigation." "Are you surprised?" I asked, my deep voice remaining smooth yet packed with the most concentrated dose of venom. "When you stood on my wooden porch and threatened the career of my daughter, you believed you were intimidating a Katy man who already had one decaying foot planted in the grave. But what you didn't know was the man you were threatening spent decades tracking encrypted oceans of money for transnational weapons conglomerates. Those amateur encryption algorithms you used to hide your mountain of stolen money were, to me, easier to crack wide open than the loose rusted window latch I'm repairing in my home kitchen." Richard stumbled backward, the oak chair positioned behind him dragging across the floor, producing an ear-piercing shriek of scraping metal against the polished hardwood. Where the hell did you get these? This is fabricated. This crazy, delusional man is slandering me. Whether these are fabricated or not is what the trained agents of the FBI will answer for you." I cut him off, my voice cracking through the room like a whip. The entirety of this detailed criminal dossier was already transmitted to the Armed Financial Crimes Division of the FBI at 8:00 a.m. this morning. In fact, this second, while we're sitting in this room, I suspect armed tactical agents have already kicked down your office doors and frozen one of your illegal bank accounts. I turned my hardened gaze toward Evelyn. Her made-up, aging eyes were bulging out of her head, staring in complete shock at the terrifying folder resting on the table before she snapped her terrified gaze toward her lover. "Evelyn," I pronounced her name, the sound dripping with ice. "You returned to my home because you believed I was sitting on top of a lucrative gold mine. You believed this corporate lawyer was going to secure your financial payday. But the undeniable truth is this man is bankrupt. He owes staggering millions of dollars to criminals embedded in the underworld, and he was attempting to steal Lily's childhood home in an attempt to save his life. You didn't discover a gold mine here, Evelyn. You've chained your neck to a boulders plummeting straight down to the bottom of the ocean." Evelyn began to stammer, throwing her trembling hands forward and grabbing a handful of Richard's suit jacket. You promised me you'd wealth. You promised you could take care of me. Shut your damn mouth." Richard ripped her clutching hands off of his fabric. Trace of his polished, refined, wealthy gentleman facade had collapsed into dust, replaced by the raw, terrified, panicked desperation of a cornered criminal. He grabbed the crimson folder, shoving it into his briefcase, and he threw toward the floor-to-ceiling window, staring down at the busy street below like a deranged madman. The exact second his terrified eyes locked onto the 2 blacked-out Federal Tactical Command SUVs had screeched to a halt in front of the corporate skyscraper's entrance. drop of blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a pale, rotting corpse. Oh God, he mumbled to, and without speaking another single word, he grabbed his briefcase, shoved his chair out of the way, and sprinted straight out of the mediation room doors as fast as his shoes could carry him, abandoning Evelyn to face the music alone. The stern mediator clutched her hand against her chest, staring at me with an look of shock was mixed with deep respect. She grabbed her gavel and slammed it onto the polished table with an definitive crack. This formal mediation session is now terminated. The aggressive party representing Ms. Evelyn has forfeited negotiation rights due to a lack of foundational legal merit, combined with the sudden, dramatic abandonment of the premises by their official legal counsel. Evelyn collapsed into her leather chair, tears streaming down her powdered face, destroying her makeup. She turned her head to look at Lily, reaching her trembling hand out to touch the daughter she had abandoned. Lily, my baby, I was tricked. I'd zero idea he was a criminal. You've to help me, Lily. Stood up from her chair and smoothing out the wrinkles in her modest skirt. She stared into Evelyn's eyes. It was a look possessed zero anger, zero hatred, and zero residual pain. It only contained the deep, unshakable coldness one reserves for a irrelevant stranger. A child who's abandoned at the fragile age of 12 might figure out a way to find forgiveness in her heart, Lily stated, her voice light, yet packing the force of a loaded cargo train. But a grown, mature adult woman who attempts to weaponize her child in a extortion plot does not deserve to have a daughter. I wish you the best of luck with the life you've chosen for. Lily turned her back, linking her arm through mine as we marched straight out of the glass doors. Echoing behind us was the cullity of an broken woman who had destroyed things she had ever had in her life, driven by her insatiable, bottomless greed. I walked out of towering corporate building with my head held high. The crisp, late October afternoon sunlight pierced straight through the vibrant leaves of the changing autumn trees. I inhaled a breath of fresh air. There's nothing more satisfying in this universe than watching your aggressive enemies set on fire and burn to ash inside the destructive inferno of their insatiable greed. Later evening, I drove my truck back to the comforting silence of Clover Mill Road. The battered notepad clinging to the refrigerator door caught my eye. Replace the leaky rubber gasket on the kitchen sink faucet. Repair the rusty latch on the living room window, and at the bottom the word, Lily. I smiled. I retrieved my familiar, worn set of tools from the garage, walked over to the kitchen window, and began to repair the rusted metal latch. The repair process only took 4 minutes. It's ironic. Something has been broken and useless for an frustrating time only requires a simple, dedicated turns of a screwdriver to function, and once again. I've spent an amount of time reflecting upon the true meaning of choosing to stay. Choosing to stay isn't a publicized dramatic act of heroism. It's choosing to plant your feet on the ground when everyone else has chosen to run away to a more convenient destination. It's choosing to stay when leaving is an easy, tempting escape route, and remaining in place is packed with exhausting inconveniences. It's standing your ground when there's no binding legal contract or forced obligation forcing you to remain. You stand there, unannounced, refusing to demand praise or immediate reward. I stayed. There's to it. 20 exhausting years of documentation, the countless, frustrating afternoons teaching her how to drive a manual transmission, the sturdy house located on Clover Mill Road, the victory inside corporate mediation room, the humiliating defeat of Evelyn and her criminal boyfriend. Of it originates from one simple, undeniable truth: I chose to stay. Evelyn chose to make different decisions. It was the brutal, unavoidable, mathematical consequence of the greedy person she chose to become, compounded and multiplied over decades of choices. As for I built my disciplined life from decisions. And when it became necessary, my detailed records were already organized, armored, and ready to crush anyone who dared to threaten the exact people I love. It was not because I'd plotted a complex revenge scheme. It was the natural, powerful culmination of who I'm, a man who observes, a man who takes detailed notes, a man who writes your name at the bottom of his notepad alongside a question mark, because he's keeping you at the front of his disciplined mind during the most silent afternoons of his life. I packed my tools back into their battered box. I was able to wipe the specific task, repair the rusty latch off my battered notepad. Tomorrow morning, I'll call Lily and invite her back to the house to enjoy a fresh, hot cup of the exact roasted coffee we both love. You see, the things are, or your consistent physical presence, your aggressive actions taken to protect your family, they accumulate into a destructive, unstoppable force no enemy, regardless of how deceitful, or there can ever steal away from you. I capped my marker, sticking it onto the refrigerator magnet, prepared to write down tomorrow's organized list of tasks. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my personal story today. If you agree, unbreakable loyalty and protecting your family are more than a pile of fleeting money, please leave your thoughts in the comments section below. I hope you retain unshakable strength in choice you make. Until we meet again.